Dang. Chapter 20, 6. Xia Yulu finished his porridge, put on his official hat and came out of the courtyard where De Tian was sitting on a small stool, bending over and washing Xia Yulu's bedding. "Master," he stuttered with hesitance, "how about, you go out and find a courtesan? There's lots of cheap ones down the Suozi alley." "Nonsense." De Tian's words scalded Xia Yulu's ears, but there was no denying that those absurd stains on the bedding were his own work indeed. With his face blushing, Xia Yulu stuttered as well, I have had a weak constitution for the past 2 days. Don't you act recklessly." While he remained old-fashioned and reserved, De Tian was quite an unpolished lad, "But I'm washing these for you every single day. My hands are about to break." Xia Yulu avoided him as he left the house. As the door was just about to close, he could still hear De Tian saying, "Moreover, you can't afford to waste away like this every night. This is for your own good." Xia Yulu felt deeply troubled. Indeed, he could control his hands, but he couldn't control his dreams. In those dreams, that same figure came and went again and again, constantly enticing Xia Yulu in all possible ways. On the night that he and Liao Jixiang shared a bed, he was dreadful of doing anything absurd, so he held it in. But the more he held it in, the more unbearable his lust had become. And now, the region 3 inches below his abdomen was always burning and toiling, and he desperately wanted to find a place for a release. He was stunned when he reached the ministry. There was a soft sedan chair parked at the gate, with embroidered curtains and a luxurious, velvet roof. It belonged to Chu Feng. Xia Yulu strode inside tentatively. He could see the lively commotion in the main hall from afar. That young man was wearing a brocade robe of light greenish yellow and surrounded by the crowd, resembling how the stars distributed around the moon. Although his left foot was still supported by a cane, Chu Feng's complexion appeared extremely well. "Simu." Xia Yulu couldn't help but approach with a smile. Almost instantaneously, the hall fell horribly silent. Everyone's eyes were scanning all over him, ever so distant and freezingly cold, that he had to stop approaching. Chu Feng was at the center of the mass. He was rolling up his sleeves without a word, and his eyes darted evasively to give Xia Yulu a brief glance. Many things were communicated in that glance, too many for Xia Yulu to comprehend at the moment. Then, before Xia Yulu could fathom that glance, Chu Feng turned around and limped away. Following that, the crowd scattered, leaving Xia Yulu alone on the steps. For a while, he couldn't figure out what had happened. The man who should have the least reasons to despise him, the exact person who compelled him to this situation, had now become his adversary, acting wise to protect his fame. He remained standing over there for quite some time. Only after making sure that no one else would come, did Xia Yulu walk away dejectedly. In the afternoon, a fifth-rank official surnamed Lu distributed the invitations to the ministry's banquet. Everyone was on the list, including the assistants and clerks, except for Xia Yulu. Moments before leaving the ministry, Zheng Xian's invitation arrived, asking him to attend a banquet at Jinyi North Garden, which was quite a coincidence, because when Xia Yulu arrived, he found that the venue was just next door to the banquet of the Ministry of War. Official Lu arranged this banquet for Chu Feng on behalf of the Minister of War. This feast was organized to assuage Chu Feng's shock from those torments in prison. Xia Yulu was physically present on this side of the wall, yet his heart was on the other side. He listened to the commotions next door, of his colleagues toasting and drinking, of how they showered and bestowed many and more flattering words upon Chu Feng. The more he listened, the colder his heart became. Then, Xia Yulu turned around. Things were much quieter on this side. Zheng Xian had invited someone new today, who was dressed in a sleeveless armor and carrying a long sword. With Tu Yao acting as the middle person, Xia Yulu learned that the man was the newly appointed commander-in-chief who had previously fought against the Japanese pirates in Zhejiang. His name was Gong Nian. Zhejiang. This place caught Xia Yulu's attention. When Liao Jixiang was chopping down the pear tree woods, he had borrowed the soldiers from Zhejiang. He couldn't help but take a closer look at Gong Nian. The man was rather athletic. He had probably spent years leading the soldiers, as his complexion was quite tanned, although he was still somewhat good-looking. The most astonishing feature about him, however, were his wrists, which were as thick as a mature elm tree, and he had knife scars scattered all over the back of his hands. "Thank you, Du Gong, for your hospitality." Gong Nian sat upright as he raised his cup to Zhang Xian. "This one toasts to you." He uttered no unnecessary words, nor was he excessively ingratiating towards a Dang. Xia Yule was quite impressed. It was extremely rare for Zhang Xian to drink a toast in such a straightforward manner. Evidently, he was interested in Gong Nian. After setting down his cup, Zhang Xian used his thumb to point behind himself. "General, beyond the wall over there is the banquet of the Ministry of War. About the lad they branded as a hero. You can ask Tu Yao." He threw his arm on Tu Yao's back like they were brothers. "See if he's actually a piece of scrap." Gong Nian remained silent and respectfully listened to Zhang Xian, his empty cup still in his hands. When the general arrived in town, the Ministry of War failed to step out to welcome and honor you, but this one does. Zhang Xian tapped his hand, which was wearing a jade ring, on the table. "But this one is not sowing discord between you. No, this one is seeking justice for you." Only that he was indeed sowing discord between them. Xia Yulu observed Zhang Xian with amusement. Underneath the gorgeous appearance of this fellow, there was actually a rather unrestrained, sinister soul. If Liao Jixiang was a gherkin, then Zhang Xian was a sword. He came and went straightforwardly, and it was much easier to comprehend his mind. Except for Xia Yulu, everyone at the table belonged to the military. They drank heartily with not much heed of excessive etiquette, and the banquet ended even before midnight. As they left the venue, Xia Yulu asked Tu Yao, "Why didn't we invite some entertainers to sing? Doesn't he love lively scenes?" He was naturally referring to Zhang Xian. Tu Yao smiled. "He's afraid that Gong Nian wouldn't like it." Xia Yulu was taken aback. "What's his background?" Tu Yao waved his hand to indicate that wasn't the case. "He fought against the Japanese pirates valiantly on the coastal regions, with little regard for his own life. Just take a look at the scars on his hands," he said dispassionately. "You don't know much about Du Gong. He admires people like Gong Nian." He paused. "Besides, if we don't take care of these people, no one else will." What Tu Yao told him might not be entirely true, but also, it was not necessarily false. What was certain, however, was that this banquet showed Xia Yulu something different, unlike every other banquet he had attended ever since his arrival in Nanjing. He went homewards on foot, and De Tian opened the door for him. Feeling too embarrassed to face De Tian, Xia Yulu hurriedly entered the house, yet De Tian called from behind, "Master, there's a letter for you. It's from Beijing." The letter was on the table. Xia Yulu checked the signature. It was from her. She had never written back to him. So, with an odd feeling in his heart, Xia Yulu removed the letter from the envelope and read it while taking off his robe. After reading the first 2 lines, he froze. "Heard from the folks that you're now working for eunuchs. I ain't no scholar, but I sure care about my face. Just send me a letter of divorce quickly. Let's part on good terms and be on our own ways." The letter was written by a scribe. The scribes normally wouldn't use such colloquial phrases, so it was most likely that she didn't allow him to alter or refine her words. Xia Yulu crumpled the letter in his hand. This was just like her. Without bothering to light a lamp, he sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, his robe half untied and hanging loosely over his chest. His heart churned and toiled with immense bitterness, as if there was a blunt knife twisting and cutting it, but it was so ineffective that no blood came out. He was now truly a lonely man, with no prospects and no family. He didn't even know whom to hate for his misfortune. And when he closed his eyes, All he saw was darkness. After roughly straightening his robe, he went to De Tien's room to fetch a lantern. De Tien turned over on the bed bare-chested and looked at him. "Master, where are you going at this hour?" Only when the door slammed shut with a loud bang did it suddenly dawn on him to shout, "Do you have enough money with you?" Upon exiting the courtyard, Xia Yulu had walked quite a distance before he lowered his head and realized that the lantern wasn't lit at all. Lying in front of him was a single, dark path and he stumbled alone, his mind in a daze. After crossing Zuk Street and reaching Xianzhen Lane, when he was just about to turn towards the back gate of the mansion, a horse approached afar from the east, carrying a lantern on its side. It stopped at the front gate of Liao Jixiang's mansion, and a man jumped off the horse. Xia Yulu recognized him. It was Gong Nian, but he was no longer dressed in the sleeveless armor that he wore just now. Rather, he was in a light purple daipao. He must have deliberately gone back to change his attire. It was just as expected. He indeed had some connections with Liao Jixiang. Standing in the darkness, Xia Yulu fixed his eyes on that brightly shining lantern. In the light, Gong Nian presented an invitation and exchanged words with the gatekeeping eunuch, and without waiting, he assertively entered the mansion. Xia Yulu turned to leave. Liao Jixiang would probably be too busy to see him tonight. However, he couldn't bear to leave further after taking only a few steps. In the dense darkness, he made his way to the back gate and knocked. The gatekeeper recognized him and greeted, "Master Xia," although he didn't allow Xia Yulu inside. And so Xia Yulu waited in distress, as if his soul had departed from his body. He could hear the murmurs of the eunuchs on the night shift coming from the gate. They had an argument, should we let him in or not. One of them stuck his head out with a fake smile on his face. "Please wait, master." So, Xia Yulu waited. Nearly half a shishan had passed until the door finally opened from inside. Shining over the corridor was a yellow lantern, and behind the lantern stood Ruan Dian with his arms crossing on his back. He glanced at Xia Yulu under the dazzling light, then raised his head and turned around, indicating for him to follow. Xia Yulu immediately followed him. Initially, he wanted to walk behind Ruan Dian, but Ruan Dian kept making way for him and walked beside him. As they walked, Ruan Dian also studied his face with curiosity, yet whenever Xia Yulu glanced at him, Ruan Dian would quickly avert his gaze. "Do you want to say something?" Xia Yulu asked. Appearing rather irritated, Ruan Dian gritted his teeth and pushed the servant holding the lantern in front of them, urging him to keep some distance. Then, he fiercely said to Xia Yulu, his face still as savage and untamed, "In the past, my apologies for offending you." This was an attempt to amend their relationship, but his attitude was far from proper. Xia Yulu nodded without uttering a word. The yellow lantern led their way. Like a full bright moon within reach, it cast a golden glow on the edges of leaves and grass, adorning them with a shade of gold. In the dizzying warmth of the yellow light, Xia Yulu suddenly blurted out, "Perhaps he is tired of me." Ruan Dian knew what he was referring to. He had heard about the incident on that morning from the servants. However, hearing these words coming from Xia Yulu's mouth made him feel odd no matter how he tried to interpret them. Before he could figure out where the strangeness came from, Xia Yulu spoke again, "How could they take half a shishan to report my arrival? Did he tell you to leave me hanging?" "He got that right." Ruan Dian froze at his question. He was about to deny it when they arrived at Liao Jixiang's main chamber. Xia Yulu didn't wait for his answer, or perhaps he didn't dare to hear it. He said thank you, hastily, and escaped into the chamber in a hurry. The same old white candles were still burning coldly and quietly. Liao Jixiang was not around, probably accompanying Gong Nian. Xia Yulu allowed his mind to wander for a while as he stood by the window sill, then he walked left and right aimlessly in the room until he strolled to the desk. He saw numerous letters scattering messily on the desk, and one of them had a corner peeking out, revealing the character Zhang. Xiaoyu was well versed in the etiquette of respecting others' private matters, but that character was like a needle, piercing and itching his hand. So he tugged at the paper gently and revealed the signature. It was indeed Zhang Fang. Since he was already pulling it, he decided to take them out once and for all. It wasn't just a single letter, but rather a small pile, all of which was written by Zhang Fang after he arrived in Nanjing. No matter how randomly Xiaoyu picked the segments to read, all he found was melancholic and nostalgic verses. We've shared the parting feasts 5 years afore, and some of the old poems in my mind remained anew. Now we obtained a brief respite from the tumultuous fate. Can the 2 wild ducks acquire more luck to fly south? Conj ointment. The word conj ointment looked inappropriate in Xiaoyu's eyes no matter how he tried, so he quickly schemed through the letters. Yet another sentence caught his eye. Thou treated me as a confidant, yet I trampled on thy heart. The door creaked behind him. Liao Jixiang had returned. Xiaoyu shivered. The letter slipped from his hand and fell back onto the desk. Liao Jixiang noticed that Xiaoyu was reading his letter, but he didn't say anything. In fact, he never intended to speak to Xiaoyu anyway. Liao Jixiang stood there and stretched out his hands lazily. Like an indulgent master, he had the junior eunuchs attend to his garments and washing. On the other side of the room, Xiaoyu intentionally chose the farthest chair from Liao Jixiang to sit on without looking in his direction. He remained silent even after the servants were done busying with their errands and made their leave. The two of them confronted each other in silence. It was a night with pleasant breeze, and the insects were chirping energetically. Yet the more they chirped, the quieter this chamber appeared. I need someone, Liao Jixiang spoke first, but only to give instructions to the servants outside, to prepare the guest room. Xiaoyu felt a sharp pain surging in his heart, and in that instant, all those matters Chu Feng, the letter of divorce, Gong Nian, Zhang Fang jumbled and squeezed together in chaos, pressed crushingly against his chest and rushed upwards to his nose. His eyes were stinging all of a sudden, and soon they became moistened with tears. In the beginning, he kept his head down, striving to hold it back. But soon, tears came streaming down from his nose. He wiped them away with his sleeve, the left sleeve and then the right sleeve, again and again. Liao Jixiang noticed his movements, and at that moment, someone outside reported at the door, Du Gong, the guest room is ready. There's no need. Liao Jixiang slowly approached. Noticing that, Xiaoyu immediately covered his face with his sleeve. Liao Jixiang went to pull his arm, but he resisted, so Liao Jixiang made a few more attempts but to no avail, as Xiaoyu pushed him away every time. What's the matter? Liao Jixiang asked. He squatted down and looked up at Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu clenched his teeth and was determined to stay silent, so Liao Jixiang didn't press further. He sighed and walked away. Still covering his face, Xiaoyu stubbornly waited for Liao Jixiang to come and console him again. Soon, Liao Jixiang took a seat on the chair beside him. A simultaneous sound of plink came to Xiaoyu's ears, which was the sound of fingernails plucking the strings. Xiaoyu lifted his head in surprise, and he saw Liao Jixiang, sitting upright with an old pipa in his hands. His fingers slid over the strings like he was caressing water, and he was ready to sing a tune for Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu thought it must be a famous verse, something like, unable to bear the yearning for my love in my dull life, I fell into drowsiness where my love paid a visit in my elusive dream. Yet to his surprise, Liao Jixiang began with, I wore the moon as my hat and the stars as my robe, fearing and dreading for him. Standing long under the muslin windows, I waited for him. It was an erotic tune, and Liao Jixiang was well aware of it. His singing betrayed subtle uneasiness. Suddenly heard the sound of footsteps outside the door, and I thought it was my cursed love. At that moment, any casual glance of Liao Jixiang towards Xiaoyu seemed to be brimming with emotions and hidden intentions, his eyes ever so gentle and loving. Yet it turned out to be only the wind, rustling the tea millet plants. The melody abruptly stopped, as Xia Yula was grabbing his hand. Liao Jixiang blushed and explained, "Back in the palace, I only knew how to sing this. I'm on my own now," Xia Yula blurted out. Couldn't grasp the meaning of his words, Liao Jixiang furrowed his brow. Xia Yula lowered his gaze. He couldn't bring himself to tell any other men about such occurrences, so he could only tell Liao Jixiang, "My wife doesn't want to be with me anymore." Liao Jixiang's eyebrows twitched. He leaned over the armrest of the chair, and for the first time, he reached out towards Xia Yula, wiping away the half-dried stains of tears on Xia Yula's nose with his warm fingertips. Being treated so tenderly at a troubled time like this, Xia Yula's heart felt just like a tiny boat struggling afloat in a raging stream. He slid off the chair, half kneeling and half sitting at Liao Jixiang's feet. Looking up, he wrapped his arms around Liao Jixiang's leg. Although there were so many things on his mind that he could say, he only pleaded stubbornly, "Will you, let me kiss you? Will you?" Liao Jixiang was startled, then he became alarmed. "Will you?" Xia Yula pressed on. Liao Jixiang blinked helplessly and spoke, his voice couldn't be even softer, "You've already done it once, so why bother to ask?" He was referring to the incident in the peach blossom forest. Xia Yulu immediately grabbed his sleeve, pulling him down from the chair and bringing him onto himself. He looked at those innocent lips of Liao Jixiang, and lightly touched them with his own. After the brief contact, Liao Jixiang turned his face away. But how could such a light and short-lived kiss be enough for Xia Yulu? He eagerly asked, "One more time, can we?" Liao Jixiang was reluctant, but he still allowed it. He turned his head slightly back, and waited as his eyebrows furrowed. Xia Yulu leaned in for the second time, and this time, he didn't let go after the touch. Instead, he was even emboldened to probe the tip of his tongue on Liao Jixiang's lips. Yet as soon as they made contact, Liao Jixiang shoved him away. Xia Yulu pleaded, feeling wronged, "I haven't even." Liao Jixiang covered his mouth with his hand, looking back at Xia Yulu as if he were a pervert, and rubbed his lips against the back of his own hand again and again. Xia Yulu earnestly reached out to kiss him again, but Liao Jixiang evaded his touch. With an air of seniority, Liao Jixiang said, "One shouldn't indulge in anything for more than 3 times. 3 times. Not knowing whether he was amused or aroused, suddenly, Xia Yulu pounced on Liao Jixiang and brought both of them to the floor. With a sinful lust that came out of nowhere, Xia Yulu held onto Liao Jixiang's chin, taking advantage of his innocence, and skillfully guided Liao Jixiang's tongue into his own mouth. End chapter. Da-dang. Chapter 27. As the scarlet sun set in the west, Xia Yulu was trimming his dwarfed hatang planted under the east window of the house. The flowers were freshly bloomed, tender and at the prime of beauty. Behind him, De Tian was squatting by the vegetable field, harvesting the leeks one handful at a time. "Master," he chuckled, "was it good?" Xia Yulu absent-mindedly replied, "What's good?" "Why, the courtesan of course." De Tian turned to look at him, grabbing a handful of lushly green leeks. "You went out in the middle of the night. Didn't you go to look for a girl?" "Nonsense." Xia Yulu turned to look at him as well, "I'm not a patron of the prostitutes." "Oh, really?" De Tian pursed his lips, "Forget about your patron or whatever. Just look at you, coming back in the morning with that look on your face. You clearly got some tastes of kisses, but you just won't admit it." Xia Yulu wanted to retort, so he opened his mouth twice, but still decided to give up. Finally, feeling rather embarrassed, he said, "It's not what you think it is." He turned back, afraid that De Tian would see the smile lines around his mouth. "It's someone special." He reminisced about last night, the warmth, the touch. As if those feelings were still lingering on his lips, "Nothing much happened, we just held hands. Hugged." De Tian asked eagerly and joyfully, you kissed? Xiao Lu remained silent. Ah, you definitely kissed. De Tian exclaimed and smacked his lips enviously. You officials, keeping one at home and hiding another one outside. You really know how to enjoy life. Hearing him mention one at home, Xiao Lu was in distress again. The letter I asked you to send this morning, did you send it? Surely, I sent it already, master, De Tian grinned naively. Now that you're with Eunuch Zheng, you must be rich. When will you give me a raise? Even a servant like De Tian knew about his betrayal. Xiao Lu's face turned cold. I didn't take a single coin from him. Oh my master, why are you so naive? De Tian waved the kitchen knife in his hand. The surface of the knife was facing the crimson sunset, reflecting a blood-like shine that hurt his eyes. He has more than enough money. Since they were coming from different perspectives, they wouldn't be able to reach to an understanding, so he might as well drop the subject. Xiao Lu put down the scissors, dusted his robe, stood up and got ready to leave. I have a gathering tonight, you can sleep first. There was indeed a gathering, which was Zhang Xian's family banquet. Just because Xiao Lu didn't want to go, he was killing time by trimming the flowers at home. As he exited the gate and turned left, he noticed a sedan chair parked by the road. It looked rather unfamiliar, so he walked over. Suddenly, the curtain of the sedan chair was lifted slightly to reveal a narrow gap, and a voice called from inside, Chun Chu. The moment he heard that voice, Xiao Lu stopped. He should have turned around, yet he didn't want to. From behind, that voice called again, Chun Chu, just a few words. Xiao Lu's heart softened after all. He turned back and entered the sedan chair. Chu Feng was sitting inside. The withering light of the golden red sun shone through the cracks between the wooden boards and the curtain, casting a bloody hue on that face, making it dreadfully unfamiliar. Just like what they used to do, they squeezed together shoulder to shoulder. I've come here to thank you, said Chu Feng, for sacrificing yourself to save me. I will never forget it so long as I'm breathing. Xiao Lu retorted, is that why I did it? So that you would never forget. Chu Feng remained silent. Xiao Lu glared at him intently. I did it so that you could come out of there alive and well, so that we could drink and chat just like before. Chu Feng lowered his head. You don't even drink at all. Xiao Lu was at a loss for words. Then there's nothing more to discuss. He waved his hands repeatedly, I have nothing more to say to you. We're like two carriages racing on separate paths. Chu Feng was provoked by his words, what else can I do? You're already with Zhang Xian. Must I also throw myself down into the pit, just to repay your favor? You can't repay me. Xiao Lu suddenly snarled. There's no way you can repay my heart. Clearly startled by his abrupt exclamation, Chu Feng apprehensively lowered his voice and warned, keep your voice down. So, you are afraid that people will find out about us? Xiao Lu sneered. Just don't visit me if you're such a coward. He lifted the curtain to leave, but Chu Feng held onto his sleeve firmly. Xiao Lu. Chu Feng hid in the shadows, unwilling to reveal even just a corner of his face. Remember, when the time comes, I will repay your kindness for a lifetime. Xiao Lu forcefully pulled his sleeve out of Chu Feng's grasp. Go ahead and repay my kindness like the thief you are now, young Master Chu. As he left, he dropped a final auspicious phrase for parting, may you climb high and succeed soon. Each of them was holding grudges against the other. As the conversation had already reached this point, no one wanted to hold it back. Xiao Lu flicked his sleeves as he strode away in the sunset. He walked in rage and in determination, and with each step he took, he felt an unrestrained thrill. By the time he arrived at Zhang Xian's residence, the evening banquet had already begun. Although it was called a banquet, it was more like a casual gathering. In the small hall near the water, 5 or 6 large couches were laid down for the guests to sit on, with each and every one of them surrounded by beauties from all directions. Xia Yulu was dumbfounded when he entered. Those women, wearing revealing silk and muslin robes, all wore their hair in the popular peony style, and adorned themselves with tiansui hairpins and huadian. Golden bracelets could be found on all four limbs of these women, which jingled with their every movement. Guo Xiaozhou occupied the sandalwood couch next to Zhang Xian. He was leaning on his side and propping his chin up with one hand. On his forehead, between his eyebrows, was a tiny red drawing of an arrowhead. Without shoes or socks, his fair, delicate feet dangled lazily by the edge of the couch. He was holding a sweet melon in his hand, carelessly taking bites. "Hurry up and take it off," Zhang Xian pointed to his hair bun, where a tiny silver hairpin was worn. Judging by its color, the hairpin should be made of pure silver. "Don't let me see that shabby thing." Guo Xiaozhou acted like he heard nothing, and swung his little feet even harder. Zhang Xian stretched his leg and kicked the edge of Guo Xiaozhou's couch, still showing it off, and jokingly invited everyone to be his judge. "I don't know what's going on with this lad. He's gotten himself involved with a little eunuch. Shouldn't I scold him?" The guests present tonight were all trusted men by Zhang Xian, and no one treated him with unnecessary courtesy. Tu Yao spoke as he cracked the melon seeds. "It's just young love between lads. Dugong, you're being too nosy." Zhang Xian immediately sat up straight, preparing to have a lengthy argument with him. Then, from the corner of his eye, he caught sight of Xia Yulu, so he immediately waved. "Chun Chu, what took you so long? Come on, today's great rescue is good." A servant promptly brought forth a plate of steamed cakes, which was mixed with walnuts and dipped in milk. The dish was indeed exquisite, yet to call it great rescue was probably quite an exaggeration. Xia Yulu took the plate and found a couch to settle in. Across the water, the opera troupe was performing the Moon Prayer Pavilion. The musicians and singers were all female, presumably Zhang Xian's private troupe. Today, Zhang Xian dressed up like a Taoist. He was barefoot with most of his hair hanging loose about his shoulders. The hair on the top of his head were tied into a bun and kept under a small purplish gold hair cap. With his pretty looks and his black cloak, every gesture of him made him appear like a lofty ethereal being. "He's no little eunuch," Guo Xiaozhou glanced at Zhang Xian with irritation. "He's quite respected among Liao Jixiang's men. Besides, I'm just toying around with him. Do I have to find a prince or a nobleman?" Zhang Xian was both annoyed and amused by his attitude. "Pick a decent one even if you're only playing around. This one has no silver when you ask for money, has no object when you demand for pleasure. What's even there to play with?" Naturally, the object being referred to was a man's private parts. Xia Yulu couldn't help but chuckle. Zhang Xian was truly different from Liao Jixiang. He wouldn't hesitate or grieve on sentimental matters. All he preferred was to lavishly boast about his wealth and power. After finishing the cake and wiping his hands, something suddenly brushed past Xia Yulu's feet. Thinking that it was a cat, Xia Yulu was startled as he lifted his foot. Yet when he looked down, he realized that it was just a red brocade ball embroidered with patterns of carps. A toddler came chasing after the ball. His hair was tied into two small buns on the side of his head, and he should be about 2 or 3 years old. Those big black eyes of his were as dark and shiny as grapes, which made him irresistibly lovable. Behind him followed another older child, about 7 or 8 years of age. He was dressed in a radiating golden robe, and appeared like a proper master. "Adi!" The toddler spotted Zhang Xian among the beauties and shouted in excitement. Xia Yulu was astonished as he immediately turned to look at Tu Yao, who whispered to him, "He bought that one. A fake son." No wonder Zhang Xian paid no heed to the child. He didn't even get up to hug him. Instead, he pushed forth those women with exposed bosoms, instructing the toddler to call them mom. The little one obeyed innocently, and so, one after another, the moms pressed their alluring red lips onto his little cheeks. Xia Yulu couldn't stand by anymore, so he went forward and took the child away in his arms, using his sleeve to gently clean his face. Presently, the older child climbed onto an empty couch. He randomly brought a woman into his embrace and began kissing her. Seeing that, Xia Yulu tugged Tu Yao's sleeve in horror. He bought that one as well. Tu Yao burst into laughter. That's no child. He leaned closer and whispered in Xia Yulu's ear, that's a dwarf, named Ling Ji. Du Gong had invited him over for medical treatments. Xia Yulu was stunned. What kind of treatment? The treatment down there, Tu Yao signaled to Xia Yulu with a subtle glance. This dwarf had learned from the lamas. In Nanjing, no prostitute is unafraid of him. They all call him the king of lust among the flowers. Xia Yulu's jaw dropped in astonishment. Tu Yao stealthily glanced towards Zhang Xian's lower abdomen. Do you see a slight bulge on Du Gong, down there? He's hanging some medications there. It's called the banner in the wind, also known as the dragon and tiger's robe. Thinking of Liao Jixiang, Xia Yulu suddenly had an idea. Does it work? It's actually just an otter's penis. Tu Yao supposed that Xia Yulu didn't know much about the logic behind. The male otters have an insanely insatiable desire for mating. When the female otters won't let them have their way, the male otters would rub themselves against trees. By the time they die, their thing could have penetrated the wood for an inch or more. So, people have been cutting the tree and removing it from the wood for medicinal purposes. Then, Xia Yulu was so embarrassed that he blushed. How much is it? Tu Yao looked at him rather surprised. Buying for yourself? And no, not really. Xia Yulu pondered back and forth for a proper excuse. I want to try it. Tu Yao blatantly looked towards his lower parts. But you don't look like you'll need. At that moment, another guest arrived. A young eunuch led the way and the guest following him was a higher-ranked eunuch. Xia Yulu cast a quick glance towards him and to his surprise, it was Ruan Dian. Ruan Dian was also taken aback when he spotted Xia Yulu, as he displayed guilty expression on his face. His steps paused for a moment, which was noticed by Zhang Xian. Brother, he leaned in, appearing concerned that Ruan Dian might create difficulties for Xia Yulu. Liao Jixiang's enemy isn't your enemy. Don't disrupt the delicate harmony. Ruan Dian and Xia Yulu exchanged a quick glance, and smiled. That's right, I have no grudges against Master Xia. He walked over and took a seat on an empty couch. Xia Yulu pretended to be calm and composed, but in reality, he was rather upset for Liao Jixiang. Ruan Dian was visiting Zhang Xian without informing Liao Jixiang. He was clearly taking advantage of both sides. Brother, Zhang Xian casually pointed to one of the young ladies surrounding him, politely gesturing to her to serve Ruan Dian. Heard you've been tight on silver lately. Ruan Dian didn't evade the question and admitted in a straightforward manner, the one at home is good at emptying my pocket. He was referring to the Yangzhou courtesan from Zushi. Zhang Xian toyed with his wine cup and suddenly brought up the subject. What's so good about following Liao Jixiang? Why don't you come and help me? Xia Yulu stared intently at Ruan Dian, watching how he remained slick and untroubled. It's a bit early for us to discuss this, isn't that so, Zhang Juyi? Zhang Xian laughed heartily, appearing to have not been offended at all. There's no hurry. His eyes abruptly shifted, as if he had recalled something. Rumor has it that you've been whipped by Liao Jixiang. Which was quite an obvious move to poking at Ruan Dian's wound in public. Guo Xiaozhou, Tu Yao, and Ling Ji all turned to look at Ruan Dian. Ruan Dian, however, shamelessly smirked, I've been whipped too many times. I'm used to it. At that moment, Xia Yulu was truly convinced that Ruan Dian would turn against Liao Jixiang. Among the trusted members of the Weaving and Sewing Bureau, only he caused frequent conflicts with Liao Jixiang, not to mention that Ruan Dian had never read any of the classics. He was apparently a selfish soul who sought after profit. By this time, there was only one empty couch left in the hall. Zhang Xian discreetly shifted his gaze over and said with considerable disappointment, "Come on." He set down his cup, flung his long hair from his back to his chest, gently cupping it with his hand, and winked at the guests. "Let's play at the back for a while." As he spoke, he emerged from behind the flesh-folding screen formed by his concubines and ladies. With the assistance of a junior eunuch, he went around the pillar of the corridor and went behind the small hall. Xia Yuluk foolishly tailed him, but after taking a couple of steps, he noticed that Tu Yao didn't move, so he asked, "Why aren't you coming?" Tu Yao smiled and cracked his melon seed, making a crisp sound. "You go ahead. I'm not interested." Without thinking much, Xia Yuluk went past the pillar around the small hall. Hiding behind it was a dark room. He advanced boldly, yet almost instantly, he instinctively covered his face as if he had been stung in the eye by a wasp. Inside that chamber was a sea of pale flesh. Men and women, swarming around Zhang Xian like bees and butterflies around a flower, serving him from head to toes. The scene was truly horrendous. Xia Yuluk wanted to retreat, but he was frozen in place and couldn't even move a finger. From behind Xia Yuluk, Ling Ji brushed past and went forth, leaving a trail of garments on the floor as he proceeded. Despite his childlike appearance, he impatiently squeezed his way towards Zhang Xian, too skillfully, even obscenely fondling his chest. Xia Yuluk's eyes darted all over the room in panic, unable to find a place to settle. On the floor, several copies of woodblock printed "The Plum in the Golden Vase" were scattered carelessly on the floor, their open pages filled with explicit erotic drawings. He stumbled back out, his face flushed and glistening with redness as he passed by Ruan Dian. Like he had just witnessed something extraordinary, he pointed behind him as he exclaimed, "In there!" "Oh, what absurdity!" Ruan Dian's lips curved with some hidden meaning. As if he knew the secrets of the dark chamber, he teased Xia Yuluk in a casual manner between acquaintances, "It's just that business. Look how scared you are." Judging by their tone, they were far from being complete strangers. Naturally, Tu Yao squinted his eyes to study them. Xia Yuluk noticed his gaze, so he quickly walked towards him while pointing at the empty large couch, asking, "Who's supposed to be here?" Tu Yao's gaze at him was inquisitive. Gong Nian, his face bearing an expression as shrewd and cold as a knife. He can't tell the good from the bad, and refused Du Gong's kindness. End chapter. Da-dang. Chapter 28. Petals of the peach blossoms fell from the sky. At one glance, all the tree branches were now overflowing with green and scarce with red. There would always be petals drifting down as they strolled under the peach trees, and this spring shower of pink and white stirred a melancholic feeling within them. Liao Jixiang was in front of Xia Yuluk, secretly feeling for his lips as he walked. His lips were still burning, as if that kiss was so passionate that it was going to turn him inside out. "It's too shameless," he thought. Two men moistly sucking on each other's lips if he could genuinely be considered a man. "Why are you walking so fast?" Xia Yuluk gently tugged him from behind. Being tugged by Xia Yuluk made Liao Jixiang feel extremely, unbearably embarrassed. His face turned red like it was on fire, his lips tightly pressed together, and he even had a lingering impression that there was still a tongue inside his mouth, shamelessly sweeping across his teeth, and mischievously fondling the back of his throat. Back in that moment, he actually made a sound. Like he had been forced into a corner, he let out a helpless It was not a big deal initially. However, because of his indecent response, Xia Yuluk paused to look at him, his eyes fixated on him with fervor, with thirst. If he were to be honest, Liao Jixiang was actually afraid. He wasn't sure what exactly he was afraid of. Perhaps it was this unfamiliar feeling of adoration, or the sudden dominance of this man pressing onto him, or perhaps he was also afraid of his broken, shattered self. "Can I unlace your clothes?" Xia Yuluk panted as he asked. Liao Jixiang immediately tightened his collar. He refused. Feeling disappointed, Xia Yulu began to pound his lower body futilely against Liao Jixiang. Probably he also meant it with a hint of revenge, as he rudely licked Liao Jixiang's cheek, nibbled at his chin, forcefully trapping him between his arms and clasping his arms. Liao Jixiang closed his eyes in fear, allowing Xia Yulu to do all sorts of strange things to him. He felt something warm about his thighs. Xia Yulu's fan handle is poking me, he thought. With each obscene movement, the warm handle vividly brushed against his skin again and again. Yang Chun, Xia Yulu grabbed his arm from behind and pulled him into his warm embrace. Now that he had experienced so much more, how could he be content with only silently looking at that figure? Don't ignore me. I'm not ignoring you, Liao Jixiang replied feebly, innocently trying to break free from his grasp. Yet how could he escape when Xia Yulu was already absolutely determined? Like a red-eyed husband filled with jealousy or a grumpy infatuated man, he held onto Xia Yulu, hugging him as he blatantly explored his body. Let go. Liao Jixiang exclaimed. He had never been this close to someone before, nor did he enjoy doing so. The way you're, is like a madman. Xia Yulu wanted to say, I am truly mad for you. But as he held Liao Jixiang in his arms, bending his neck around his sideburns and inhaling the scent of sandalwood mixed with milk on his body, he couldn't bring himself to say anything else. All he wanted was to indulge in this moment. Liao Jixiang felt embarrassed. It was a feeling of not knowing what to do, mingled with shame and fear. You, go back and tell Zheng Xian, tell him to send some men to supervise those folks repairing the embankment, he shivered, not daring to even draw a deep breath, trying his best to maintain his composure. Someone reported to me, that they seemed, suspicious. Xia Yulu was too preoccupied with licking and nibbling on his neck to answer. Do you hear me? Out of shame or something else, Liao Jixiang became anxious. He pinched Xia Yulu's arm hard through his sleeve. Being caught off guard, Xia Yulu yelped in pain and stared at Liao Jixiang blankly. Liao Jixiang guessed that he may have hurt him by pinching his arm. Feeling guilty, he stopped struggling. Only after some moment did Xia Yulu dare to get closer to him again, and this time, Liao Jixiang was rather tame. He asked both in distress and in fear, what exactly do you want? Shh, Xia Yulu pampered him like how one would comfort a little girl. Growing up, Liao Jixiang had never been loved by someone else like this before, so his voice now even carried a hint of coquettishness. Don't delay the matter. Do you hear? I did. Xia Yulu dismissed him like an impatient lover. They're just some common folks. What suspicious act can they be up to? Liao Jixiang meekly nestled in his embrace. There are also soldiers among those building the embankment. Xia Yulu unknowingly tightened his arms around Liao Jixiang's body. This worry wasn't unfounded. Liao Jixiang was a man who carried the empire's well-being in his heart. Despite being disparaged and demeaned to the current state, he had never cared about his own gains or losses. Xia Yulu felt simultaneously frustrated and somewhat regretful. He posed a question that was destined to dampen their mood. Why did you accept that money? He was referring to the gold and silver ingots in the chest. Liao Jixiang, still holding grudges against Xia Yulu, replied sourly, when I'm old, I'll need to buy a coffin, prepare a decent shroud and hire the monks to chant sutras for me. If I don't seize the opportunity now, who will be there for me in my old age? Xia Yulu anxiously grabbed him and turned him around, their faces inches apart. He opened his mouth like he was about to say something, but eventually swallowed his words and opted to say something else. The otter's penis. Have you heard of it? Liao Jixiang's expression was getting uneasy, his head drooped awkwardly. So, he knows. Xia Yulu discreetly admired his snowy white forehead and his pair of faint eyebrows. He gently leaned against his ear. How about you try it? Liao Jixiang shook his head, so Xia Yulu wrapped his arms around him extremely carefully and tenderly. Zhang Xian uses it. It's said to be effective. Quite some time had passed before finally a muffled voice came from Xia Yulu's embrace. He's only partially cleansed. It was then Xia Yulu realized that he had misspoken again. Feeling half heartbroken and half guilty, he slowly and gently caressed Liao Jixiang. Presently, that familiar urge surged from his lower parts again, the urge to do something to Liao Jixiang. In order to suppress this evil flame, he frantically searched for a new topic. By the way, in the future, treat Ruan Dian better, will you? Liao Jixiang was probably being held too tightly by Xia Yulu. He fidgeted slightly, but didn't move much, clinging to Xia Yulu like a kitten or a puppy Xia Yulu kept from childhood. Why do you bring him up? It's just. I just remembered that you hit him. Doesn't sound like it? Liao Jixiang's face rubbed against Xia Yulu's robe as he raised his head, his big round eyes wide open. Xia Yulu had never seen him like this before, so very obedient, that it was almost as if he belonged to him. Not giving him another chance to speak, Xia Yulu suddenly kissed him. Liao Jixiang was startled as he tried to back away, but wherever he went, Xia Yulu followed. It was the same as last time. Xia Yulu used his tongue and was almost giving it all out. Being teased in so many ways so relentlessly, Liao Jixiang soon became languid and pliant. Yet Xia Yulu still felt that it wasn't enough. Without giving Liao Jixiang a chance to catch his breath, Xia Yulu grabbed him by his waist and began to drag him into the nearby woods. Liao Jixiang was appalled. He tugged hard on Xia Yulu's shoulders to struggle, futilely kicking his feet against the ground. Eventually, Xia Yulu simply propped him up, holding him high in his arms and walking deeper into the denser forest. I'm shouting for help! Liao Jixiang exclaimed, but in a low voice. The way he tried to keep his voice down made Xia Yulu feel like they were genuinely engaged in a taboo act. However, the more he felt like this, the more aroused he became. In his mind, Xia Yulu wanted to pin Liao Jixiang down on the dew-laden grass field. But when the moment truly arrived, he was gentle and slow, placing Liao Jixiang properly on the dry sandy ground. Then, facing him, Xia Yulu sat down bashfully, like they were newlyweds. Liao Jixiang couldn't bear to be stared at like that, his face flushed with a gorgeous red out of embarrassment. I'm going back. As he said so, he tried to get up but was pushed back down by Xia Yulu. He glared at Xia Yulu fiercely, attempting to get up again, but still, Xia Yulu stopped him. Finally, unable to stand it any longer, Liao Jixiang questioned Xia Yulu in a troubled tone, what do you want? He was so flustered that he was becoming incoherent. I'm not a woman. What do you want? Xia Yulu remained silent and fixed his eyes on him quietly. He reached out, his finger hooked the collar of his garment, and slowly pulled it down. Because his action was slow, Liao Jixiang was unguarded. Not until something tiny and of a pale pink color was revealed from the narrow gap between the tied fabrics, did Liao Jixiang remember to cover it up. Acting unexpectedly, Xia Yulu suddenly tore open the other side of his collar, revealing half of his shoulder in an instant. Under the verdant green shade of the trees, Liao Jixiang appeared glaringly pale. Pak was sounded when Liao Jixiang slapped Xia Yulu. A flock of birds departed from the treetops, fluttering their wings and leaving a few leaves to fall. Xia Yulu covered his face. I'll kill you when we get back. Liao Jixiang dropped a threat, but judging by his red eyes, nose, and mouth, he was clearly frightened by Xia Yulu's despicable teasing. Liao Jixiang anxiously fixed his collar on the left side, and if one looked closely, he would notice that even Liao Jixiang's fingers were trembling visibly. Xia Yulu didn't retreat. Instead, he became even bolder. Taking advantage of this opportunity, his large hand swiftly slipped under Liao Jixiang's right collar, blatantly taking the tiny nipple between his ring finger and little finger. Liao Jixiang let out a scream. He let go of his collar, his hands now clasping Xie Yulo's wrist with a layer of fabric in between, as if he were grabbing some fierce and unruly beast. Through the fabric. The words out of his mouth were not of a scolding nature but more like sweet whispers when a couple flirted. If we're seen by someone. No one's here. Xie Yulo clamped Liao Jixiang's armpit. Using what he had learned from Zheng Xian's banquet the day before, he frantically kneaded and slowly rubbed against that innocent chest. Liao Jixiang softly moaned incessantly. Moaning as he didn't let go of his hands clutching onto Xie Yulo's wrist. After speechlessly enduring this for a while, he eventually succumbed completely and begged, "Chun Chu, stop rubbing it. Your nipples are hard." Xie Yulo poured even more oil on the fire. Liao Jixiang couldn't withstand hearing the word nipples in his ears. As soon as he heard it, his whole body felt like it had been scalded by boiling water. He trembled and shook uncontrollably, pitifully producing slippery beads of sweat. End chapter.